There. Now, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Alistair Darling's been helping to organise the No campaign, as you heard. When I spoke to him earlier, I asked him how prominent a role he would play.
I will be playing a major role, along with other political parties, but also, crucially, along with other people who are not allied with political parties. I don't think this is an argument that's going to be won by, two sets of politicians, arguing with each other over the next 2.5 years. We have to engage Scottish opinion in what will be the biggest decision we make as a country for perhaps 300 years. But these are important issues to be discussed. I believe very strongly that Scotland would be better off remaining part of the UK. These are arguments that have to be pursued and have to be debated.
But isn't the blunt truth that the SNP currently have the only charismatic force in Scottish politics at the moment?
Well, if you look at the poll published today, opinion on independence hasn't shifted really in the 5 years since the Nationalists took power here. And their momentum has stalled, there's no doubt about it. They did not do as well as they thought they would do in the recent Scottish local elections. Look at the poll today, they are not shifting public opinion, and the reason is quite simple. People in Scotland are pretty canny.
So how would you envisage it working if it had to work? I mean, would a single currency work for two nations?
Well, it's interesting, the Nationalists have changed their position. They were in favour of the euro until the beginning of this year. Then they said they were going to use the pound like Panama uses the dollar. When it was pointed out that meant interest rates would be fixed then by a foreign country, they're now saying they want a currency union. The thing about currency unions, as we can see all together clearly in Europe, is that they lead to increasing economic and then political union. So what is the point of leaving a union only to arrive back in a situation where you're forced back into it? And you have all the problems that you see with the euro just now, where you have to have your budgets agreed by some sort of central body. We have to send our budgets down to London and so on, and we've lost representation. This is nonsense, and it will be exposed as nonsense, and I think the majority of people in Scotland will see it as complete nonsense.
Could you foresee representation, say, on the MPC, the Bank of England, from Scottish politicians?
No, I don't. I mean, if you look at the MPC at the moment, it's not there. It doesn't have representation from different parts of the UK. It's there because it's got people on it whose expertise is trying to forecast what will happen with inflation and then decide on interest rates. It's never been there as a sort of representative body. And when you think about it, if Scotland decided to leave the UK, why is it that the remaining parts of the UK would say, well, here is our central bank, here is our policy committee that fixed interest rates, but we're having someone from another country onto it? Look, the answer to this is we are being invited by the Nationalists to take unquantified risks with our future at probably the most uncertain time we have seen in modern times. We are in a very, very difficult economic situation where we've got a European situation that seems to be getting worse by the day, problems with banks there as well as with the economy. They're asking us to take risks which they can't quantify.
So would you, under any circumstances, countenance a second question on the referendum ballot which said, shorthand, Devo Max?
Well, I don't think you can put another question on the ballot paper unless you specify what exactly it is. And the problem with what is known as Devo Max or Devo Plus is that it's not defined. There are 57 varieties of these things. And, I'm inclined to agree with the SNP's deputy leader on this point alone, where, she agreed that unless you have a specific defined proposition, you can't really put it on the ballot paper. We understand independence. We understand remaining part of the UK. That's the question you put to people. We don't have to wait 2.5 years for the answer to that. We could easily have this referendum next year. The only reason we're not having it is because, and certainly today's evidence points on that, Alex Salmond doesn't think he can win. He wants to sit it out, and I don't think that's right for Scotland.
The former Chancellor, Alistair Darling, speaking to me a little bit earlier. And Stuart Hosey is the SNP's Treasury spokesman at Westminster. He's in our Dundee studio. And you heard there, Stuart Hosey, from Alistair Darling, that they were being asked to take unqualified risks at the most uncertain economic time. Why would you choose such a vulnerable moment to try and convince people this was a good idea?
Well, Alistair Darling made a whole series of assertions in his package. It amounts to no more than the usual scaremongering we've seen. I mean, The best one was the stuff about the central bank. The Bank of England is our central bank as well. It is completely independent. And what would happen with independence, of course, is because the central bank doesn't work or set debt targets or deficit targets or growth targets, and the governor and the MPC studiously avoid even commenting on fiscal policy, is that the Scottish Finance Minister and the UK Chancellor would have exactly the same powers, that is, the discipline of monetary policy set by the central bank.
Of course, but
full control over fiscal
hang on a sec, it sets interest rates and its remit is set by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And you heard there from a former Chancellor that Scottish politicians would not have a place at that table. Wouldn't that worry you?
But UK politicians don't have a place at the table because it's completely independent. The only target which is set is the inflation target, and that's sensible. And in a currency union, if you agree a stability pact, say deficits to run more than 3% over the cycle or something like that, that's extremely sensible. We're very comfortable with that.
Well, you know that the Treasury's involved in major decisions like quantitative easing. You have to approve things like that. I mean, basically, what was being spelled out is that you wouldn't have a force in the economic cycle and movement of what would be essentially your own country.
Well, I'm sorry, Emily, but that's simply not the case. I mean, you accept the discipline of the central bank, of course you do, in relation to monetary policy. But what we would have, and it's a thing we don't have now, is full control over all of the fiscal levers in order to actually grow the economy and not make the same austerity policy-driven mistakes that the UK government are making, and indeed that Alistair Darling made when he was Chancellor, laying out £87 billion worth of cuts in tax rises.
Sure, but you don't have to look very far, you know, to Europe to work out that it might not be a great idea to try and shoehorn two economies into one currency.
Well, that's absolutely right, and the reason we've got problems in Europe is precisely that. Productivity in Greece and productivity in the Ruhr Valley are night and day. Productivity between Scotland and the rest of the UK
what would happen. You don't know what would happen, and you wouldn't
Emily.
be able to make those decisions independently.
Sorry, Emily, productivity across Scotland and the rest of the UK is near identical. So you don't enter a currency union with huge imbalances. You enter a currency union, which we're already in, by the way, with productivity near identical. So we don't have the difficulties of the huge imbalance between, say, southern Greece and northern Germany.
OK. Well, you heard the poll that came out today, which showed that, 30% would vote yes if it was asked today. I mean, doesn't it tell us a lot about your confidence in your campaign that it's not even on the table for another 2 years?
No, it's going to be in 2014 because that's the promise we made at the election. And in terms of today's poll, it was one poll. It was a very strange, skewed question, but we'll set that aside. Some polls have showed independence ahead, others not so well ahead. So what we need to do is run the campaign, get it all bottomed out, publish a detailed perspective and win the argument.
The truth is, if somebody offered you Devo Max, whatever that constitutes, a bit more power, the SNP would be pretty happy with that, wouldn't they?
The SNP stand for independence. We're campaigning for independence, and the campaign was launched today, Emily.
All right. Stuart Hosey, thanks very much.
Thank you.